The people that I worked with were very nice, the local people. But you could see, like I don't even know what the word is for it, but like the tribalism that went on, and my experience was with the Republican Party in Wisconsin, but I'm sure it's the same with the Democrats. This tribalism and everyone's desire to climb. It was really a lot of people that were trying to work up the ladder either in running for public office or in the administration or bureaucracy of the party, and that's all they were about.
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found in the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, and today we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Phil Anderson for U.S. Senate here. So Phil, how is it going today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
And I'm excited to chat with you because I don't know that I've actually conversed with anyone that was running for office to learn about the ins and outs of what it takes to actually run for office.
There's a lot to it. When I first started, I ran for office for the first time in 2014 and knew basically nothing, just decided that I needed to do something and then discovered things along the way.
All right. You know, it's interesting you say that because we run into all kinds of people, I imagine you even more so, that are talking politics or whatever and how if they were in charge, right, what they would do.
Exactly.
But they never run. Or I don't even know if they coach a little league
They
team.
might not even vote.
They might. Oh, that's even more interesting right there. So I'll just complain. I want to play the victim kind of thing. But you were actually getting out there and doing it.
Absolutely, yep.
So tell me, what was the compelling reason or the thing that got you going the first time?
Well, I followed politics religiously my entire life. And then in 2008 and 2012, I was a supporter of Ron Paul, and I saw how poorly he was treated, not just by voters, but by the Republican Party itself and by the media and the polls. They were leaving his name out even when he was doing really well. And it just it was an indication to me right off the bat that that the things weren't being run as honestly and fairly and democratically as I had thought they were. So I complained about it a lot, and my children, who were like 14 and 11 at the time, said, "Dad, you should do something about it. You know, you can happy to talk about it, so why not do something?" So I decided to run for state assembly, District 47 in Wisconsin in 2014, and that was a really big adventure. But I learned a lot. But that's basically how I got started. And it's kind of like anytime you see something unjust or that you feel like you need to deal with, it's hard to forget that. You can't unknow certain things,
right?
And and to lose your motivation about certain things. So I've been fighting for liberty and prosperity and cleaner government ever since.
All right. And have you been successful?
No, not yet. Right. Not yet, but I hope to be this fall.
Not done yet?
Nope.
Fair. So tell me, when you decided that first time, you said 2014?
Yes.
All right, 2014. Let's start with what it takes to actually get on the ballot. Is that just you fill out a form? It's like, hey, I'm cool?
No, it's not. It's not that easy. It's not bad in Wisconsin, though. Every candidate, except for the presidential candidates of the major parties, has to gather signatures during a certain period of time in order to be on the ballot. And it's scaled based on what level of office you're going for. So for state assembly, it's at least 200. For state senate, 400. For Congress, the House of Representatives is 1,000. For U.S. Senate and any of the statewide races, governor, lieutenant governor, et cetera, it's 2,000. And you have approximately 6 weeks, April 15th through June 1st, to gather those signatures from people in your district or in the state, in the case of statewide voters, and submit them to the Wisconsin Elections Commission, and they check them over to make sure that they're all authentic and that you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's and that sort of thing, and then you're on the ballot.
And are these physical signatures? Like you're going with a piece of paper?
Exactly.
Door to door?
They're petitions with 10 spots for signatures on them. And they have to be wet signatures. They can't be electronic signatures, nothing like that.
Wow.
They have to be hand signed by people and print their name and their address on there, their voting municipality, and the date. And then whoever's circulating the paper has to sign at the bottom once it's all done to verify that they in fact personally gathered the signatures. So you can't even, let's say, leave a clipboard in your break room at work or something like that. It has to be attended, and those signatures all have to be witnessed.
Wow, all right.
That's a chore. But at least in this state, it's fair between the parties. There are other states where there are different requirements for independent or third-party candidates versus Republicans and Democrats. Illinois is one of them. Alabama and Georgia, New York all have really, really high signature requirements for independent and third-party candidates.
Really?
Yep.
Wow, that's
So I'm grateful.
Yeah, that's
I'm not
certainly.
complaining. We're in the process of doing that right now. We started April 15th, so I'm out gathering signatures. I've got volunteers all over the state doing that, but as you can imagine, it's one person at a time. Would you consider signing? And the premise is, do they want more choices on the ballot? And most people, even if they're already in their mind committed to another candidate, or they already know they're going to vote Democrat or Republican, most people are fair-minded and want more choices on the ballot for other people, because that's what democracy looks like.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's usually not too many no's, but it's still a question of actually doing the work over 6 weeks to turn those many in.
I imagine that's a lot of nights and weekends then, knocking on doors.
It is. And I've been doing that already, and as I said, I've got volunteers doing it at different parts of the state. There are different ways to be more efficient about it. If there are parades or farmers markets or things like that, when there's a lot of people there, and they're not necessarily going quickly from one place to another,
Sure.
then that's a good spot to ask. And there's a lot of candidates that are out this time of year doing the same thing. So I think people are generally prepared to get those sort of questions this time of year, at least at like the Dane County Farmers Market and other places. But the idea is that you use your time efficiently, otherwise you're wasting your time as a volunteer. Knocking doors does work because, to the extent that people are still answering their doors. I mean, since COVID has changed that a little bit, people are less likely to, they're more likely to be home, but less likely to answer the door. But there's also sort of a personal dynamic there in that if you're standing on their doorstep asking for a signature, if they agree with it, they'll say yes. Whereas if somebody's moving, like for example, last night we were down at the UW campus getting signatures from students, and if they're on their way to class, then it's no thank you on the way by.
Yeah,
it's
got
fine.
Places to go, people to see.
Exactly. So there's definitely a strategy to it that I've learned. When I ran for assembly in 2014, it was more about knocking on the doors in my neighborhood, which was in the district, and saying, I'm your neighbor. If you don't know me, I live right over there, and would you sign to get me on the ballot? And so that was highly successful, but not terribly efficient. Now running statewide, being at the Dane County's farmers market or the public market in Milwaukee or at Memorial Day parades, it's more a question of getting in front of a lot of people to generate that number.
Does it get weird at UW campus since you don't necessarily know if they're a resident of the state? I don't even know how voting works.
Well, in Wisconsin, at least for the purposes of signing, you have to be an eligible voter. That doesn't mean you have to vote here. So in Wisconsin, as long as you've lived in the state for 30 days, you can vote. Even if you're a student and you plan on voting, where your parents live, out of state, whatever, as long as you have lived in Wisconsin for 30 days prior to signing, then it's legit. And I think the only people that are excluded from voting are felons who are still on paper. Pretty much everybody else, if they're 18 and above, has the right to vote, so they can sign.
All right, nice.
So it's not, again, in Wisconsin, there's 2,000 is a lot of signatures, I think, but especially for an independent or third-party candidate, because my opponents, Tammy Baldwin and Eric Hovde, will just send those documents out with people to county GOP or Democratic meetings, and everyone will sign. So it's a lot more of a chore for me or any other independent or third-party candidate.
Sure.
But I'm not complaining. That's just the nature of what we're trying to do, and that is run against those big bureaucracies.
So tell me, why did you choose Assembly before and then Senate now and whatever else? I don't know. Mayor, city council,
I've never run
whatever,
for mayor.
governor?
I did run for governor in 2018. I started out at state assembly and I lost as a libertarian, and that was going to be an uphill battle in Dane County, which is very progressive, which is kind of the opposite of libertarianism. Progressives want a ton of government. Libertarians want as little as possible, but still got about 25% of the vote, which I would consider successful.
Wow, yeah.
In 2016, the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin was looking for somebody to run for U.S. Senate against Russ Feingold and Ron Johnson, and I had done a good job in running for state assembly. I was the vice president, the vice chair of the state party, so I decided to run. And then in 2016, that election got a little over 3% of the vote, so 87,500 and some odd votes, which was relatively successful. So then we moved on to running for governor in 2018. I ran as a Republican for state assembly in 2020. That's a longer story, but Rebecca Kleefisch approached 3 of us libertarians that lived in Dane County to run as Republicans because I don't know exactly what their rationale was. I think they didn't want to waste Republicans running because they had no chance of winning, and it was an opportunity for us to get some knowledge about how the big parties do their campaigning, and we did learn a lot. I didn't join the Republican Party, nor did the other 2 candidates, one of whom was my son. Yeah.
Okay.
But we did well, and we learned a lot, and now, so I didn't run for anything in 2022. And so now, because I've got a statewide network, which is part of kind of what I hope we talk about a little bit, is how that's grown over the years, networking and building a movement and people that are willing to support you time after time, and what the value they get out of that. In 2024, I've raised more money already than I have in previous campaigns, more volunteers, more chance for success. And of course, as pretty much everyone knows, America and Wisconsin are dying to have other choices on the ballot besides the main two choices. And that goes for not only president, for U.S. Senate as well.
Yeah, everything.
Yep.
Everything.
It's time to have more choice, and so that's an opportunity for us.
Yeah, I don't even know why or how. I don't know the history of how we ended up with two parties versus, and I assume what it all boils down to is people like the light switch either on or off. It's just simplicity.
Well, there's a lot of psychology behind it, but I also think it's pure genius in a way, because a lot of the big donors, the big lobbies, give to both sides, give to both Democrats and Republicans, but because basically what they're paying for is access, and in the current state of the federal government, they're paying for the privilege to actually write the bills. So almost every bill that goes to Congress now is written by a lobbyist, submitted to party leadership or both parties' leadership. They pass it down through committee. It goes up and down with very little amendment. It goes to the floor of either the House or the Senate, or often both in that process. There are generally up and down votes with very little amendments. And as you know, there's bills that have a ton of different things in it that aren't really based on the name of the bill.
Yeah.
The Inflation Reduction Act had a ton of spending in it, which is bad for inflation, yet it was called the Inflation Reduction Act. That's just one example. So that's what's going on right now. And if you have a two-party system where both parties are willing to go along with that process, and they also have the opportunity of blaming each other for things.
Oh, sure.
So there's never really or not enough of a focus on the whole government or both parties as the problem. It often goes back and forth.
Interesting.
And so that's why I think it is brilliant. And another reason that it works is, I'm going to tell you a little story.
Yeah.
I'm Eastern Orthodox. I became when I got married back in 1998. I married a Russian Orthodox woman, so I joined that church. So this story is in the context of church, but it applies to politics, and your listeners are going to recognize this, what I mean as well.
All right.
There's a Russian Orthodox man who gets stranded on a deserted island in the South Pacific, and he's there for 20 years. And finally, an airplane flies overhead, sees somebody down there, calls to the Navy. The Navy goes out to rescue this man, and he's, delighted to see them, that he's been rescued. But before they leave, he wants to show the captain of the boat everything that he's done on this island. So he's built this house. He's got these monkeys that are trained to pick bananas. He's growing coconuts. He's got a little cart he wheels around. And the captain's looking around the island, and he says, well, what are those two buildings over there? And the man says, that is the church I go to, and that is the church I do not go to. Which, if you apply that to modern politics, a lot of the energy behind Biden is anti-Trump and vice versa. And that is a very powerful psychological tool that if you are donors or industries like military contractors that want a certain outcome from the federal government, that is continual wars, because they make a ton of money off that, and they give money to both parties to accomplish that, then that psychology of you don't really need to have a dynamic, positive candidate with a vision. You just need the candidate, you just need to paint the other one as a threat to democracy.
Yeah, find a common enemy.
Exactly. And then they'll fall in line. And that's really the way our government works at this point. And it's pretty powerful. It's evil genius, I would say.
Right.
But that's why it makes it more difficult for independent or third-party candidates to be successful as well, because we're trying to break through that psychology, and it's very deeply embedded in many people's identity.
Do you ever feel like people are sheep when you hear something like, all we need to do?
Come on, no, I can't say that out loud. No, I'm just teasing.
Do you have a safe place here?
People aren't sheep, because I think if people, as they are made aware of this, it does take a little bit of time to reconcile yourself to it. If I say to somebody, and this is historically accurate, that the United States has been involved in more attempted coups, regime changes, starting wars, lies about wars, all these things that we know are true, they're on Wikipedia, they're in history books, and that the United States federal government has been the problem around the world for 70 years. That's a lot for people to accept at face value. I mean, they may know it's true in their heart, and they may think about it as they go to sleep at night, like I do every night pretty much. But that's a lot to accept and then act on. That most people, at this point anyway, would rather ignore that or write that off because they have their life to deal with. They have their problems of just being, working and living and being in a family or raising kids or whatever it is, and that's really a lot to contemplate and take on. So I wouldn't call them sheep at all, but it's just it's gotten so bad at the federal level that it's a lot for anybody to take on and act on, even vote or even listen to. It's very uncomfortable to hear that a deep down part of our identities, being Americans and being proud of being Americans, and all that is supposed to mean, is in danger or may not be true anymore. So, not sheep. You said sheep.
I didn't
say sheep. But is it a lot to overcome? Absolutely.
Well, so I say sheep because I see this when you see a group that they're not necessarily for something, they're collectively against something. And they're all like, yeah, like they got their pitchforks and all that kind of stuff to go kill the evil monster.
Exactly.
Without thinking, wait a second, is that really that bad of a monster? It's not bugging anyone. Right?
Well, and I'll give you an example. I don't support President Donald Trump at all, and didn't when he was running. But the Democrats are coming back around and saying he's a threat to democracy. Okay? Well, he was president for 4 years. So that kind of deflates that argument, I would think. Nothing terrible happened in those 4 years, really.
Well, I suppose an argument could be made on both sides.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't a threat to democracy. We still had elections, and the country still ran, and
we still have clean drinking water and electricity.
Yeah, so sure. Again, not supporting him, and the Republicans have painted Joe Biden, and they really painted Barack Obama as this radical leftist, et cetera. And he didn't close Guantanamo Bay, and he didn't legalize cannabis, and he didn't do a lot of things that he said he was interested in doing, because I believe that the presidents don't really have that much control over things. That it's the donors that control them, because if they step out of line, and not so much presidential candidates, but to a certain extent, but anyone in Congress, if they step out of line and decide, I'm not going to go along with what the party leadership is telling me to do or expects me to do, they get ostracized and primaried out, and boom, they're gone. So it's kind of a condition of employment in Congress to be compliant. And even the ones that aren't compliant are only non-compliant occasionally, or speak out about certain things, or have such a lock on their own constituency, like Ron Paul did. He was very, very popular in his congressional district in Texas, so there's no chance the Republican Party was going to get him out of there until he retired. So that's really the only chances of any sort of dissent in Washington until I get elected.
Okay.
That's the plan, right?
So, right. So I think what I'm reminded of is Feingold when the Patriot Act came around.
Yes. Now, I ran against Russ Feingold, but I give him credit for voting against the Patriot Act.
And I think he was the only one, right?
He was the only one, yep. And he's a good example, and I would argue, and I don't know, I mean, running against Tammy Baldwin, and I'm not saying this to pick on Democrats at all, but I think they both came from a place of very well-meaning, wanting to stand up for the people, et cetera, and then got sort of sucked into this Washington lifestyle and the influences there that now, that Russ Feingold later in his career became much more in favor of things that you wouldn't think he would have when he first started out. And Tammy Baldwin doing things like not speaking out to help free Julian Assange, which is a very important First Amendment issue. Pretty much always being on the side of Israel against all the the genocide that's going on in Gaza, or at least not speaking out about it. Advocating for F-35s to be 5 miles from here at Truax Field, which the community was against and a lot of her fellow Democrats were against. That sounds to me like somebody who went to Washington with the best of intentions and then got influenced, and in order to stay in power or to stay involved or whatever, became part of the problem rather than bucking the machine. And I think that's pretty common with Republicans and Democrats. Even those Republicans who went to Washington in the Tea Party movement in 2010, a lot of them turned back into standard regime-supporting Republicans.
Sure. Conform.
Yeah, exactly. They just got swept in. So it takes a tremendous amount of character and resistance to do that. There are a couple that have. But the luxury or the benefit that I'll have if I'm elected is that I won't be part of the Republican or the Democrat bureaucracies. They'll have no influence over me. So they'll try to, but by construct, they will not. So that gives me an opportunity, and anyone who's running as an independent or a third-party candidate on behalf of a party that's not, nearly as powerful as Republicans and Democrats, to stand up to that, to tell the truth about things, and to not get swept up into the sort of the corruption and the lying that goes on.
Right. So tell me, that sounds like an uphill battle.
Oh yeah. I mean, as I said, this is my 5th time running for office.
Okay.
And I know, there's a balance that any candidate, it's probably similar to maybe somebody starting there's a lot, when you talk to entrepreneurs, I'm sure there's a few of them that have started a business and it failed, started a business and it failed, started a business and it failed, and eventually succeed, or maybe they're still in that process of failing. I don't know if they call it failing uphill or whatever it is.
It's funny you say that, because I was camping with some buddies this past weekend, and the majority of these guys have been at the same job 15 years. Probably a few job hops throughout their lifetime, but statistically rare.
Yeah.
Rare. So they're like, James, what are you up to now? What's your next business venture?
And they're jealous, right? To a certain extent. As long as you're making money, they're jealous.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, I was joking with them saying, I only have to be right once.
That's true.
Right? And I've been right a few times. I've certainly been wrong a few times. Because we joked about all the stuff. They're like, how's that flower thing? Like, tank. How's this other thing? Tank. How's this other thing? Face plant.
Yeah.
It's just expensive lessons. Education's expensive. But on the other side, I've had some success in business and all that jazz. So it's interesting, because I was thinking while this guy's asking, I couldn't tell if he's asking to jab, because he asked about this flower business that I had started, which I think he knew. I hope he knew that it didn't pan out. But it was one of those, like, dude, I wouldn't trade my life for what you do.
Exactly.
You've been doing the same thing, dealing with the same people in your little cubicles for the past 15, 20 years. I think I would slit my own throat.
Yeah, that would kill me.
It would go crazy.
And to bring it back to what I do, when I ran as a Republican, the people that I worked with were very nice, the local people. But you could see, like, I don't even know what the word is for it, but like the tribalism that went on, and my experience was with the Republican Party in Wisconsin, but I'm sure it's the same with the Democrats, this tribalism and everyone's desire to climb. It was really a lot of people that were trying to work up the ladder, either in running for public office or in the administration or bureaucracy of the party, and that's all they were about. They were only about climbing, and it reminds me very much of like a corporate thing where everyone's, whatever job they're doing, they're always looking for the next one, and they only care about that, as opposed to just doing a good job or representing yourself in the workplace, or in my case, in politics. Right. So I would never run again as a Republican or a Democrat. I've been offered, but no, I don't see, despite the fact that, I'm a bit of a long shot, the stakes and what I'm trying to do aren't, and the winning isn't necessarily defined as, the success isn't defined as winning. It would be great to win. I run to win. Every night I dream about winning and what that would look like. However, the fact that running for office provides a platform, provides a candidate for people who can speak articulately on the things that they believe in, and if they stand opposed to the two-party system and see the flaws and the corruption, that there's somebody there for them, that is really the reward that I feel now, even though I'm out knocking on doors and asking people for signatures. The reward is when people see what you do and appreciate it, even if it's not going to be successful in the polls. And that's something that's grown since I started in 2014 with just a handful of people. Now I've got hundreds of people all over the state. And I just was in Stevens Point this last week, and a woman was there who's helping me get signatures, and she showed me a picture. She had made a campaign shirt for her little kid for me in 2018 when I was running for governor. Wow. That had our logo on the front and Phil for Liberty on the back. And she's like, yeah, he still got it. He's too big for it now, but he still got this shirt. And that's the sort of thing when people show you those gestures of how much, we don't always realize that. I think maybe the same in business too. When you're trying to do things, people are inspired by that to be their own entrepreneur, their own escape the grind or the 15 years at the same company. I just can't go back to that. And I'm going to keep fighting until I win or somebody wins.
Right.
Because our government is broken. It doesn't belong to us anymore.
Fair. Totally fair. So tell me about the third-party system, what you've seen. Because I remember Nader,
Yep.
and who was the short cowboy guy?
Oh, Ross Perot.
Ross Perot.
The short cowboy guy.
Ross Perot, and I'm sure I'm missing, I guess, is Kennedy now? Is that
He's an independent, yeah.
Okay.
So things really changed with Ross Perot. I think he got 19% in 1992.
And that was from him pulling out and coming back in and
Yeah,
changing
he
his
was all
mind
over
and-
the place.
Yeah.
But clearly, and this was 32 years ago now, right? People were thirsty for another choice, even though it was a short cowboy guy.
It was.
He was
yeah,
fine.
I don't-
But
doing all right.
after that, I mean, if you remember, and I don't know how old you are, but if you remember, the presidential debates used to be hosted by League of Women Voters, the networks, whoever. Now they're all hosted by the Commission or Committee on Presidential Debates, which is an entity, a corporation owned by the Republican and Democratic parties jointly,
Oh, wow.
for the very purpose of excluding and setting bars for people to get in.
Well, that's a
so
little
that
shady.
So that other people, yeah, I agree, and they have thresholds that are set. I think it's maybe 15% in the polls to get in. So I don't know what Kennedy's polling at now.
I doubt it's 15.
No, but it might be by that time. He's
Okay.
spending a lot of money and he's getting on the ballot in various states. He's doing a good job so far. But it's really set up that way so that they don't ever have somebody walking in and spoiling the party, so to
Okay.
speak.
So
And
the
Wis-
Ross Perot's or Ralph Naders of the world come up and say, "Hey, I'm important too."
Yeah, and-
Or those lists of people that you see when you're in the poll, and you see 6 or 7 people, whatever, on that list,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Who are these guys?"
Yeah, exactly. So in Wisconsin, it's a little bit different, but it's also kind of the same. The debates for statewide office are run by the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association Foundation.
Okay.
And the WBA is a trade organization of television and radio stations and newspapers, I think, too. Maybe not newspapers, was television and radio stations across the state, as such representing them as constituent members. So they have criteria that they set, and the criteria for this year are when they do the debate invitations, which will be after the primaries, so like September or so, the candidate has to have raised at least $500,000 by that point and be polling at 10%.
Wow.
At least. Which to me, I mean, I understand them not wanting to have anybody in.
Sure.
But if a candidate has already gone through the process of getting on the ballot, which is getting signatures, which shows significant support, energy, organization, et cetera, they should be in the debates. And so setting those criteria the way they are is trying to, in essence, exclude people for the benefit of those member organizations that make a ton of money from Republican and Democratic candidates. So if they didn't do that gatekeeping for the Republicans and Democrats, they then wouldn't have as much advertising revenue.
Interesting. So from my point of view, I feel like it's a little bit ironic because a lot of times during the debates is who you're like, I like this person, not a
Exactly.
fan of that person.
Exactly.
Where that could, a good debate or bad debate, depending upon where you're which podium you're behind, could move the needle.
Exactly.
I would think. So if you're not even invited to the party,
Exactly.
oh,
And for that matter, just breaking into the media, the mainstream media, the big newspapers, I mean, a lot of that has to do with polling too. So Marquette has already started polling for the Senate race and the presidential races. I've not been mentioned in the polls so far, which is fine because I'm not on the ballot yet. But in 2016, I started out at 9.5% in the first poll in July. So that was 8 years ago, bigger network now, a lot more awareness, more name recognition. So I'm hopeful that we'll be starting off at least 10% in the polls and go up from there. But money raising is going to be difficult because 2 reasons. Number one, I don't have big lobbies breaking down my door to give me money because I'm not going to do what they want me to do.
sure.
And because there's a lack of awareness, because until that happens, mainstream media outlets aren't covering third-party independent candidates. I mean, Kennedy has just broken through recently, but it's going to be at least that difficult for me once I'm on the ballot because they're just used to that binary thinking. Who are the Republican and Democrat running? And so it'll be a chore, but it can be done.
All right.
I'm confident.
Fair. Totally fair. Let's talk about the business side of running.
Okay.
Or I should say business and personal from a time.
Okay.
So you got to tell your family, hey, funny story. I'm not going to be home for a while because I got to go get 5 million signatures. And I got to go to fancy dinners, raise money, or whatever it is that you do to raise money. All that time and energy has to be stuck in there. So how does that conversation go with your family? or even friends, whatever.
Well,
Maybe
it's
golfing buddies. I don't know.
The people that the non-family people who have always been supportive.
Okay.
From day one, and that's from 2014, 16, 18, 20, et cetera. That number has grown, but I have some of my closest campaign volunteers are people that have been around since 2014
Oh, nice.
and believe in what I'm doing and contribute. I mean, they give money, they're out getting signatures, they help in every way possible. The family thing is a challenge because, like you mentioned, then you're gone. So what I did in 2014 and 16 was my kids were helping.
Oh,
So that
nice.
made it easier at home because they were already politically sympathetic, although they were young. But my kids would travel around the state with me in 2016 and 2018 when I was running for governor and help, and they really enjoyed that. But then they were also doing something productive and not a burden at home. They
Sure.
were being watched.
Yeah.
And then I'm no longer married, and my kids are adults, so it's not really an issue for this campaign cycle.
Okay.
But when people volunteer to run for office, if they suggest it, I'm considering running for office, then that's the first question I ask them, because we want to make sure that people are not, burning bridges at home, and that we've seen that before. We had a candidate that showed up at a meeting about 2 months ago that walked in and said, "I'm interested in running against Mark Pocan as a libertarian," and we're like, "Great, have you talked to your wife and kids about it?" "No, I'm going to tonight," and then it all got shut down, which is fine because we're all human beings and we obviously love our families, and that's very, very important. I've been blessed over the course of my involvement in politics to have support from my family, especially my children. And as I mentioned, my son ran in 2020 for state assembly as well. But if somebody doesn't have that for whatever reason, then they should be very careful about what they do, and they can help in other ways.
All right.
They can contribute money, they can do social media, they can organize, they can put up yard signs, whatever it is.
Sure. I always think of the movie Heat. When Al Pacino was talking with Robert De Niro at the coffee shop. And Robert De Niro's like, you got to be able to walk away from whatever you have in 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, exactly. And so, even my employment, I'm a real estate broker, I can manage that around what I'm doing. Obviously, that comes first with my clients at certain times, but it's also manageable in terms of time. And there are people that I'm working with now that have known me long enough that know what I'm doing. They don't want my political activity to be at the expense of representing them in a real estate transaction. That never happens. But they do know about me, because after you work with people in a field like real estate for a while, and you're helping them buy or sell the second or third or fourth time, then you get to know them, and they become friends, and they know more about why you do what you do and what I'm doing.
Sure. So you running for office, has that ever interfered with business? And I say like you have a client, and they think or vote one way, and they have known you for years, and they're like, wait a second, I didn't know that, whatever, insert thing here.
It never has.
Okay.
It never has. And when I first started with the real estate group that I work with now, I first talked to them in December of 2018, we had a talk about social media.
Okay.
And it was completely fair because I had just finished running for governor. And so in particular, my Facebook was like set to public, and there was all kinds of stuff on there, that was true, but people that were supporters of Tony Evers or Scott Walker might not have appreciated it. So we set all that back to private, and that's what I do now. So those things that my friends need to know, which includes some clients, other real estate professionals, et cetera, they already know. But anybody who might be finding me on social media, if they're curious about what I do, will see something relatively sanitized.
Okay.
To a certain extent.
Got it.
It's fair. I mean, what I'm involved in, but to see it day after day, it really does pollute my social media to a certain extent. But I don't know. The reason I'm doing this is because I think the situation is so dire that everybody needs to know. Everybody needs to know what's going on in Washington and how bad it is and how they're being abused by their own federal government, to the point where I'm all right turning some people off occasionally if I have to, if it's making them aware.
Yeah,
I'm
I get it.
I'm willing to pay that price.
I get it. No, it's interesting because I'll do business with people, and then they go on some little tirade about X, Y, or Z, and you think, I thought you were a smart person. But then you're just like,
you get sort of, I've been in a lot of
product or service, so whatever.
Yeah, I've been in that situation often where they start talking about something and it sounds like it might be leading towards politics, and so I just keep quiet and nod my head a lot and say, I understand why you feel that way. And usually, almost, I mean, occasionally I'll find a libertarian or independent-minded person, but predominantly they're people that either support Trump or hate him. You know, that's pretty much the two sides of it. And, you know, I can usually tell where that's going and keep my mouth shut.
Sure, fair.
It's just best to do that in business scenarios, obviously.
So let's talk about time. You decide, hey, I got to get some signatures and all that jazz. How much time in a week, if someone was going to run, is practical? Are they just like, hey, 5 hours a week, I'll knock this out, or is this more like a 500 hours a week?
It depends on how much help you have.
Okay.
So for example, when I first started out in 2014, there was just me, my kids who were technically too young to gather signatures, and 3 other people. But it was only 200 signatures.
Okay.
So, we knew the district, so it was a matter of knocking on doors in that district because it has to be people signing from your district. In 2016, 18, and now, there's a lot more people involved, and the people that sign only have to live in the state for 30 days or whatever.
Okay.
So what I'm doing, and my campaign staff is doing, is we've got hundreds and hundreds of signature sheets out there, and motivating. It's more of a managerial practice than it is going out. And I'm still committed to getting at least 500 of my own, but and I know how to do that. I'll be at the Memorial Day parades. I'll be around my neighborhood. There's events that we have that are all over my calendar. People to stop and sign. We've been all over the state, etc. So I'll get mine, but for anybody, the rest of it is more about managing volunteers, which is something I had to learn to do. It's not the same as managing employees, obviously.
No, I imagine not.
I had to learn how to do that 2016, 18, and continue to do that now. And that's a little bit of a challenge, but generally speaking, you know, people who volunteer to help want to help. And there's a reason, you know, I'm not out there, you know, searching for volunteers and begging people to volunteer. It's usually people that say, hey, I like what you're doing. I like what you stand for. How can I help? And at this time of year, it's, oh, here's what everybody's concentrating on, getting on the ballot. Here's a sheet. I'd give them 5 minutes on how to do it. And then we track them from week to week to make sure that we're going to meet our goals.
Nice. So is that on you, or do you have to hire a manager, or how does that
work?
No,
we're not hiring anybody now. There's a campaign team of, I think, 9 or 10 of us that are actively involved. We meet every single week, every Monday night at 8:30 on Zoom, and we see each other at events in between. And just and then the volunteer network of people that are getting signatures there's 9 regions across the state with somebody responsible in each one for the people that are gathering signatures in that. So it's a real sort of business hierarchy of people that are out there gathering the signatures, whatever support or motivation they need, to somebody in their region, and then back to the campaign team. So it's, you know, it's really become sort of a corporate structure in a way, but it's very important because there's no firing anybody, obviously.
Yeah, right.
So you need to keep everybody motivated and positive and on board, and lots of contact with me, because at this scale, a lot of it is dependent on personal relationships that I have with people still too.
Okay.
It's not like we don't have a big organized party of people that all have their own personal relationships. There's some of that, but usually they want to believe in the candidate and have some contact with me. And so that's why I've been all over the state the last week and a half. And as a matter of fact, when we're done here today, I'm headed for Tomahawk to meet with a bunch of volunteers up there and hand out signatures and stuff. And I'll be in Eau Claire later this week, and I've already been in, Janesville on Saturday, but I've been in Madison twice, Milwaukee, Stevens Point, Marshfield, Green Bay, Sturgeon Bay, Kiel, Oshkosh, and back to Milwaukee all last week.
Holy cow.
Organizing volunteers, motivating them, thanking them ahead of time, making sure they know what they're doing, connecting them with their coordinator, et cetera.
Is this a big campaign bus, or is this just you and your car?
No, it's just me and my car. Thankfully, I like my car, so I don't mind driving it. But I'm driving around the state, so if any of your listeners see me, it's a blue Mercedes, older Mercedes, not that old though, and it's got the old campaign logos on the side.
Oh, nice.
Magnets.
All right.
Not painted on. But I'm all over the place.
Flags on the fenders.
No. I'm not trying to look like that, but yeah, so that's it at this point, and it's been this way for a few months now, but you can't miss a chance.
All right.
To engage with people in whatever way. So, you know, when I park at my apartment complex, I park outside near the front so people can see the sign.
The billboard.
At my office, I park out I'm off of, Greenway Cross and Fish Hatchery, so I park right out there so it can be seen, and I do that every day because you just never know.
Yeah.
And even driving. And that's another thing, strategy too. I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but we've taken a different path this time.
Okay.
Now, I am a libertarian, member of the Libertarian Party, have served the Libertarian Party. But the campaign this time is a broader coalition. So we're working with peace activists, we're working with former Tea Partiers, disaffected Trump supporters, people that are Democrats but don't like the fact that the Democratic Party has been pro-war, anti-civil liberties, anti-First Amendment stuff. There's a lot of disaffected people. So it's much more of a coalition campaign with libertarians in the middle than previous ones. So rather than run as a libertarian, so it won't say that on the ballot, it will say disrupt the corruption, which is my slogan.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Every campaign piece, every piece of literature, the logo says disrupt the corruption, which is in essence what we're trying to do. And the root of the problem is lobbyists controlling Congress, and that's who Congress represents and not people that they're voted in by. So we're using that on the ballot rather than party affiliation. So when people go to vote in November, it will say Phil Anderson, disrupt the corruption, because we're trying to capture that, that protest vote. So people who see Eric Hovde, Republican, Tammy Baldwin, Democrat, will see Phil Anderson, disrupt the corruption. And if they've seen the logo, they'll know that that applies to me and what I stand for, as opposed to having to remember, I like the idea of disrupting the corruption and cleaning up Washington. Who is that guy again? Yeah. Or here's this guy on the ballot and it says libertarian. I'm not sure if that's the same guy.
Right. And
they fall back into voting their previous patterns.
Sure.
And I think the same will happen with Bobby Kennedy too. He's going to be on the ballot in November. And I don't know what it's going to say, independent or something, but I think he'll capture a lot of protest votes too.
Okay. I imagine.
I think so.
You know, with his Super Bowl ad, I think it struck up some curiosity.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
It was one of those, like, I didn't know who he was or whatever, so it got me to look into it.
Well,
which that may be the only commercial that I believe that I took any action on at all. So that's probably a success for him.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I guess as far as that goes. So tell me, as far as financials go for advertising and stuff like that, we were talking a little bit earlier about the different levels, city council, little league coach, I don't know, mayor, state senator, president. They all have a little bit of, well, maybe not little league coach, but they all have some form of a marketing budget that they need and ways to reach people. And when you get in the president, you're talking billions, I imagine, marketing budget.
Yep.
So how do you get that money, and what are the rules as far as how you can spend it and all that jazz? Or
Well, we're raising money constantly.
Okay.
I put in some of my own. We've raised about a little less than $25,000 so far, which is not a lot relative to my opponents, but it is a lot for an independent campaign, and it's already, with 6+ months to go, already way more than we've raised before. And for us, everything is going back into marketing or social media in some way, shape, or form. We use a platform called Nation Builder, which includes website, CRM, donation tracking, et cetera. There's a cost for that.
That's specific to candidates?
It's you can use it for pretty much anything. A lot of candidates use it.
Okay.
But you could use it for a business too, or any sort of movement that you're trying to grow.
Oh, okay.
So it's really, really useful. We have another approach that we've taken is having regular monthly donors. So we've got, I think, 20 some people that are giving something every month as opposed to just one-time donation requests. And almost everything's going back into marketing or awareness in some way, shape, or form. We're paying for Facebook ads. We're paying for promoting tweets, that sort of thing. We bought some yard signs, but they're going out to people that have already either contributed or will contribute. So we're not selling them. That's not, you can't do that. And we have an active campaign store that has T-shirts and bumper stickers and buttons and yard signs and everything on it too. So as that money comes in, it basically gets turned around. We're not using any campaign funds or any campaign donations for anything other than that. Nobody is paid at this point. I don't think, based on the people that we have available and the jobs they're doing already, I don't think we'll have to pay anybody, which is great. We're not paying for an office. I'm just using my real estate office as a campaign office. So every donation is going right back out into awareness, which it has to at this scale.
Yeah.
So our fundraising goals are to raise $500,000 by August 1st, which will then satisfy that part of getting into the debates. Now that's going to be a stretch, but it can be done because we're using a solid CRM. We know people who have given to the Gary Johnson campaign in 2016, the Joe Jorgensen campaign in 2020, et cetera, the Ron Paul campaign in 2012, people that have given to me before, likely donors. And we're making phone calls and getting donations from that. We need to keep doing that.
All right. That's got to be tough. It sounds like a lot of
It's a lot of work.
A lot of sales.
It is. I find myself going from task to task, right? So if I'm at an event, great. If I'm gathering signatures, fine. And there's always something for me to do continuously, 24 hours a day.
I bet.
Till November 5th.
Never ends.
But the good part about there being so much to do, well, number one, I've got other people doing all these things. I'm not the only person doing any of that except for tasks at which only I can do. So I generate a lot of the social media content, writing position papers, populated the website with content, and if the candidate has to be somewhere, the candidate has to be somewhere. But everybody else is contributing to that, which is great. But if I get tired of one thing, I can pivot to something else.
All right.
I can sit down and work on the website. I can send out a mass email to our, 2,500 person list email subscribers. There's a million different things to do. So I'm never really bored or stuck in one particular task.
Right.
If I'm tired of meeting with the public, when I finish something, I can go work on something that I can do by myself or in front of a screen, or vice versa. If I'm tired of being cooped up, I just get out, take my clipboard, head out into the community, start stopping people and asking for signatures.
It's interesting because I'm hearing you just boots to the ground kind of stuff. It sounds like an awful lot of work, but
It is.
I get it. So when I reached out to the other candidates, and I got what I considered to be a runaround.
Yeah.
So as a candidate in this party, I would assume, and this is coming from a guy that has never run for anything like this, I would assume that you would invite dialogue. Like, go ahead, and I love a debate with everyone else because then I can show the world that they should vote for me because I'm better.
If you just watch Tammy Baldwin and Eric Hovde on Twitter or on Facebook, or what comes out of their campaigns, everything is in an environment that has been pre-planned and pre-screened. They're at a county Democrat or GOP function. They're at an event that they set up for their donors. Or it's just a piece that they just recorded in front of a camera. They're never confronted by people that have questions that they don't want to answer.
All right.
It's set up that way. They do not want that. And I have doubts about whether they can handle that environment very well. And even the debates that, let's look back to when Tammy Baldwin ran against Tommy Thompson in 2012 and then Leah Vukmir in 2018. Even those debates, there was some back and forth, but those questions were all vetted by broadcasters who are getting money from both Republican and Democratic candidates. It's not all scripted, but it's protected. Presidential debates are the same way. And to Donald Trump's credit, he did point that out in 2016. I'm not trying to prop him up. I'm not, no, not for me, Donald Trump, no. But when he pointed to the audience and said to Hillary Clinton, you complain about me not paying my taxes, but you were in the US Senate, you could change the tax code, but you won't because your donors make profit off that tax code and this whole room is populated by them. He was telling the truth. And at any function for Eric Hovde or Tammy Baldwin, it's all full of people that are there to nod their heads, that have already made contributions, that are already supporters, to look like they're popular and they're doing well. When in fact, most of Wisconsin wants more choices. Most of the country wants more choices. There's a lot of people, even in their own parties, who have objections to them and don't like the fact that the decks have been cleared of other candidates for both of them. But those people will never be allowed into a room where they can ask those Eric Hovde or Tammy Baldwin direct questions. They'll be screened out.
It's crazy to me.
Which is why, go back to the debate criteria.
Yeah.
They really want to have it high enough so that an independent candidate or third-party candidate cannot make it in. Because if I'm on the debate stage with them, I'll answer the questions that the hosts will ask, but I'm going to talk about some things that aren't being covered, that are vitally important, like why are we constantly at war? Let's look at how you're funding your campaigns. Let's look at the inner workings of how Congress actually works. Do you approve that? And I guarantee you neither one of them would mention that unless there was a third party or independent candidate on the stage who had that opportunity. And that's the controlling the narrative is smart. It's corrupt, but it's smart. Controlling that narrative and controlling those environments is how they control the people that you so lovingly call sheep. how they keep people sheep, because
Yeah.
people just will be difficult for them to be aware of other options, be aware of questions that other people might be asking, and even if they think about those things at night, wondering why are we always at war, or why we're always printing money, or why we're doing whatever, they won't feel like there's anyone else asking themselves those questions, because there's a sense of community, perverse community, with Democrats and Republicans that doesn't exist among those who aren't similarly aligned.
Yeah, to me, it seems that people often, usually, take the path of least resistance. And oftentimes that means don't run or complain, but don't really do anything about it. Enjoy your, I think it's safe to say that we have a sweet life.
Yeah.
And
America's
people are just like, I don't want to interrupt that.
America is the most prosperous country that's ever existed, and there's big problems and things might change, unfortunately, with the way our economy and our federal budget is run. But it's very easy for people to be victims of the old Roman idea of bread and circuses. And people are there are problems with nutrition and hunger and things like that. It's often about non-nutritious food that's subsidized by the federal government through the Farm Bill.
Right.
Another story. But people are generally have full bellies and some entertainment at their fingertips. And if we were ever in a situation where people were actually hungry or didn't have the internet or a phone to look at or something, I think there might be full-scale rebellion, actually full-scale rebellion. But until that point, it's too much trouble for people to consider what I'm talking about, what's true, but what I'm talking about, other people like me talk about, because it's not an existential issue at this point yet.
Right. Because they're going, they got their nice house, they got their nice car.
Yeah, I'm tipping the boat a little bit for them, and that not everyone is open to that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting when you compare the political stuff to the business stuff. For the business stuff, when I'm selling my services, I want to talk to anyone.
Exactly.
Because you're just like, whatever you say, I know that my stuff is better.
Right.
So I'm more than happy to have the dialogue or even compare, right? I'll take the Pepsi challenge, sure, no problem.
Well, that's what good campaigning is. And what I found to be successful in connecting with people is asking them what their concerns are. And they almost always lead back to a problem that was created by Republicans, Democrats, or both. Or something that they're not happy with. Why do we get the same old candidate? Why inflation? Why does the government lie? Why are we always at war? Whatever their concern is, I can tell them the truth. I'm not beholden to anyone else to lie, to polish something up for them to accept. I'm rebelling against all that. So if insofar as they want to listen to the answer, I'm supplying them with some information, and then hopefully some hope as well by the fact that I'm somebody they can support. What that runs against, though, is this idea that a third party or independent candidate cannot win, the viability issue, and that's a very strong thing to overcome. But I would argue, and I think this is 100% true, that your vote is your voice, and if you allow yourself to be funneled into voting for one of two candidates that you didn't participate in choosing at all, and there wasn't even a real primary for them, then your vote has been stolen by them. It's not wasted on me,
Correct.
It's wasted there if it's not reflecting how you feel about things. And that's how change can take place, even in campaigns that aren't successful, is, when I was at 3%, that was 3% of people that were really unhappy with the way things are going. When Perot was at 19%, it was the same thing. However I do this time, however Kennedy does this time, even if it's not a win, it's showing, even just to the main parties, that there's a section of the electorate that is really unhappy to the point where they will vote for somebody that they consider likely to lose in order to make a statement.
Right.
That should be the norm, I would think, in America.
Agreed.
But it's not. But at least that is the opportunity to win without actually winning the election, is to making advances in that area and making people more aware of what the problems are.
True. Very true. I love it. So needed. Phil, how can people find you?
Go to AndersonForUSSenate.com. You'll find everything you need to know there, including connections to Facebook and Twitter. I'm very active on both. And if you want to follow along or donate or just want more information, there's a contact page there. I will answer.
Nice.
If you email me. I'll personally answer most of the inquiries. if they're about some some administrative things, my treasurer or somebody else might answer. But yeah, I take that seriously. So reach out, and if you have questions or want to follow up, I'm there for you. I'm there for all of Wisconsin.
Awesome. Phil, I appreciate you being on the show.
Happy to be here.
This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. If you're watching or listening to this on the web, if you could do us a huge favor, give it the big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with your entrepreneurial friends and those that are old enough to vote and are a little curious about what it takes to run for office. And Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur and all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Phil Anderson of Anderson for U.S. Senate. Phil, can you tell us that website one more time?
AndersonForUSSenate.com.
It doesn't get easier than that. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawandcustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. Don't want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.